Hey Henry, do you take pictures when you're on holiday?
I actually do, yeah. Although I don't think I make that many.
How much did you take on your last holiday?
Oh, that's a good question. I think together me and my brother made, I think, 200 or 300 photos.
And you're saying that's not that many.
It's not that bad. I mean, some people take thousands of pictures.
Okay, but do you want to know how much pictures I took on my last holiday?
Tell me.
5?
5?
Yeah,
Ah.
more or less. Could be
So I
one off.
suppose you think very well of what you want to make pictures of, and then you make only one picture of it.
Well, I actually just forget about it.
Ah, okay.
I wouldn't look at them afterwards anyway, so I don't really bother taking them.
Yeah, well, at
But
least I mean, when me and my brother go on holiday, it's really nice to show where we went to our parents and to let them see that we were safe. So at least I showed them once.
yeah, of course. So you mainly take the pictures to show your parents that you didn't do stupid stuff.
Right.
And the stupid stuff you did do, you didn't take any pictures of. That's how it works, right?
Absolutely.
So it is mainly about storing an image. And that is, of course, what a picture is. But a camera consists out of two parts. Have you ever thought about that? It's about projecting light and storing the light.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, those two technologies were developed separately, actually, because the camera obscura, which you might have heard of, also known as the pinhole camera, was the first sort of camera, but it could only project light. Do you know what the camera obscura is?
Yes. Yeah, well, exactly what you said, right? The pinhole camera. So it basically is just a small point in a surface, and then you project it onto a screen in the back.
Yeah, and then that screen is in a very, very dark room, so the only thing you see is an image of what is happening outside on the other side of the very, very small hole.
Yeah, it's also flipped because of that.
Yeah, that's quite interesting actually. Left and right are flipped, but also up and down.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty cool pictures of where people used to do this again, but then for modern cities, and it looks just really cool.
Oh, you gotta show me that.
Let me see if I can find the picture. I saw it in a lecture because we had a course on optics, and they showed a bit of photos.
I can imagine that's relevant, of course.
Yeah,
Okay, can you show me?
it's like this.
Oh, waiting. Oh, that looks weird.
Yeah, but also really cool.
Okay, I had to put my head upside down to make any sense of it. It looks weird, man. Taking the classic image, like I'm gonna show you right now, is way more clear. Both
Right,
pictures
yeah.
will be in the show notes, of course. So that was the first development for projecting light, and that was in the year 400 before Christ, so quite a long time ago. And that didn't improve for multiple centuries, because in the 17th century, 1600 something, even the painters Rembrandt and Vermeer used this technique to get really good looking paintings. It's quite interesting how
Yeah.
they did that. I've got another picture for you.
Yeah, I heard about the Vermeer setup. Yeah, there it is. It's like a really nice way to just basically paint what's projected on like the paper.
It's actually quite an easy way. I can imagine I can do it as well on this manner. My
Well,
drawing skills aren't
maybe,
that
yeah.
great, but this way it's just drawing a line on the place that you see.
Right.
It shouldn't be
Just-
too hard, I can imagine. But Vermeer and also Rembrandt are, of course, excellent painters and quite smart how they did that. You gotta admit that.
Yeah, I really like their use of modern technology. I think sometimes modern painters maybe might want to experiment some more with it, although I'm not too familiar with what's happening right now in the like art scene. But yeah.
Well, me neither. But you say modern technology. That technology was 2,000 years old at the time. You know that?
Yeah, oh, fair enough.
It's not that modern. Anyway, so now you've got a way to project light, and now we need a way to store light. And Johann Heinrich Schulze, a German guy, if I remember correctly, he was the first to actually store some light. And what he did, he had a chemical mixture of chalk, silver nitrate, and nitric acid. And he could show that it would darken over time when it is exposed to light. Only problem is when you show it to somebody, it also darkens, so that disappeared quite fast. Therefore, it was not a permanent picture, but a good start, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, you gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But Schulze did not realize he could develop that further, or he did not succeed, I do not know. Anyway, he could not make a permanent picture. And then we're gonna talk about Niepce. About 100 years later, in the year 1814, he was the first to succeed making a negative picture using silver chloride. But that also darkens over time. And I've got a picture of that, which I'm gonna show you, which I actually just did. You can see some fake outlines, but it is quite dark, actually.
Yeah, well,
I've got a bit...
very low contrast, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I've got a picture, a better one over here right now, which has...
that one is well known, or I've seen it.
Yeah, the fun thing about this one, though, is you can see the sunlight on both sides of the picture, meaning that the exposure time was in the order of several hours, 8 hours to be more precise. I know, right?
Not a very...
Yeah, that was the first...
Not a very effective way to make photos.
No, but it's a start. It's the first permanent photo.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Yeah, he called it the heliograph in 1826, actually. This photo, which I just showed you, was taken in 1826.
Because of the sun, or because helio, sun?
Yeah, it's it has something to do with that. Helio is also light, if I remember correctly. Anyway, that was in 1826, and 7 years later, the guy died. So he couldn't develop it further, but he had this assistant named Louis Daguerreau, who was also really interested in developing photography. So I wanna talk about him and about Henry Talbot. He was British, if I remember correctly, and Louis Daguerreau is French, as you might have guessed.
So many Henrys in this episode, man. I like it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Anyway, in 1839, Louis Daguerreau invented the daguerreotype, and just 1 year later, Henry Talbot, in 1840, he developed the calotype camera. And what's the difference? Well, Henry Talbot had a easy to make and more flexible camera, but the exposure time was about an hour, while the daguerreotype had an exposure time of only a few minutes, which quite rapidly reduced to only about 30 seconds.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but that one wasn't as easy as the Talbot type. So, which one got more famous? Well, it's actually the daguerreotype, but mainly because of another reason.
Oh.
Daguerreau actually said it was free for everybody to use, because he sold it to the French government. Except for England, by the way. I guess he hated England. I know, right? And Henry Talbot, he just asked a license fee for every camera or every picture taken. That made it very, very expensive, and therefore the daguerreotype was, the one that was booming, the one that got developed.
Nice. Free market.
Yeah, I know, right? Yep, that's why it got developed so fast.
Well,
I've got a nice picture over here. It was actually taken with the daguerreotype. Let me send that to you.
Yeah, there you go. I was already looking at it at Wikipedia.
Of course. What you see in this picture is one of the first pictures ever, but it is the first ever photograph of a human being. And that's actually quite nice, because there are several human beings in this picture, but because of the exposure time, which is more than a few minutes, they all get blurred. Except for the guy his shoes is being polished. That's no English.
I got the image here, but I'm trying to find the other humans, but I can't really see them, so indeed.
No, they got blurred because of the exposure time. So imagine walking down the road, like you see on the picture. If the exposure time is 7 minutes, you might be in the picture at one spot, but at the end of the exposure time, you're long gone, you know?
Yeah.
So they got blurred and you can't see them anymore, except for that guy that is standing still over there in the left bottom corner.
Lucky guy.
I found that quite nice, actually. Yeah, lucky guy. I don't think he's that famous for his name, but people will always remember him, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think there was even a name included in the photo, but yeah.
No, there's not. I don't think it's known who that guy is. Anyway, talking about pictures of human beings, the first selfie.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I gotta say though, this picture is actually pretty good. Like the contrast is really nice. It's pretty sharp.
You can see who it is.
Yeah. Whereas I would say the first selfie is still, I'm not sure if it's just badly preserved or if it's really that bad taken at the time, but yeah, there is a really stark difference there in technology.
There is indeed. Although this picture is of course also quite old, almost 200 years old, and also taken with the daguerreotype, you can indeed say that the quality is indeed increasing. Also around that time, John Herschel, you might have heard of him, coined the word photography, which means light. Photo is light and graphy is drawing. So photography really started being used, which I genuinely quite like.
Yeah, it's really nice. Also, I think as soon as people started to figure out how this thing worked, they immediately started to make an art form of it. And it just...
It was, I think, the only way for not the regular folks, but the one that had only a bit of money to preserve the image of relatives, of friends. And that was, of course, not possible except for paintings, but those were very expensive, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So that makes them quite interesting. But what people wanted to do, of course, as well, is get a photograph which contained color. Mm-hmm. I've got the first picture with color over here. It's not that beautiful, but it has colors, so I think it counts.
It's taken by Maxwell, right?
Let me see.
Or at least.
You're right about that. James Clerk Maxwell.
Okay, yeah.
I had it somewhere over here.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how he made that picture, though. I think he used, filters or prisms. I'm not sure.
I do not remember. I have read it somewhere.
Okay.
But I do not know anymore.
But it's still in color, however he did it.
Yeah, that is quite nice indeed. Just like you said, the quality was improving quite rapidly, and people started to think about how to use this technology for scientific purposes. And one thing they always wondered about is, if you think about a racing horse, one that is galloping, has it ever one leg attached to the ground, or is it flying at a certain point in time?
Ooh, I don't know. I think it will be flying, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, you just cannot see it with your eyes.
Right.
So they had to use some sort of photography, and what they did is they had several pictures taken just after each other, and they put them next to each other. And I just sent you a YouTube link. You should watch that. It's really awesome. But you can clearly see it is indeed flying.
Nice. Oh, that's cool.
There is a moment in time which no leg is attached to the ground.
When you start to think about it, it's actually kind of a silly question, but I can imagine that people maybe get slightly heated debates about whether one or the other was true. And then, with this technology, you can just see it. It's so nice.
I think it was really hard to prove.
Right.
Until this development. And you gotta say that's just really cool.
So with only still a 30-second exposure time, how did they manage to do this?
Well, this picture was not taken with the daguerreotype, which I talked about. It was taken around 1880, which is about 40 years after the development of the daguerreotype. And the shutter time was increased quite a bit. They had almost instantaneous cameras at that time.
Okay.
So that made it indeed possible. And because of that, businesses started to boom. You know, of course, about Nikon or Canon, which are quite modern photography companies. But in 1888, Kodak was founded.
Oh, really?
And they had a quite cool concept. You purchased a a box, a camera. You could make 100 photos. You send it back to the factory. They resetted it, but they also developed the pictures. And then you could take 100 photos again. And you had that kind of loop.
But that's...
And those Kodak cameras were, of course, way more expensive than you would think about right now.
Yeah.
But it made them accessible, and that is so nice when it gets available to the public.
Well, I would say available for the higher class, but yeah, or upper middle class.
Yeah, of course, the lower class at that time was not that rich to buy a camera, but it is a start to get that happen eventually as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. Instead of just sending a film, you just send the whole thing.
Yes, because when we were a bit younger, I guess it's about 10, 15 years ago now, you only had to take the film and you took it to one of the companies in your local town and they could develop it.
Right.
Or you could do it at home in your basement. But at that time, you had to send the whole camera back to the factory. Which is a bit less convenient, but still nice.
Yeah, also a bit more expensive then, of course, because, you have to send the whole thing.
Oh, definitely. But it is a start. And like always, you gotta start somewhere and it gets developed and it gets developed and it gets better over time.
Okay, cool.
So what improvements do you want to get to a old camera? Of course, you want to zoom in, like a lens camera.
Yes.
Which only got developed in 1949, which is more recent than I thought it would be.
Because the field of optics has been quite old, and if you think about microscopy and telescopy.
And telescopes, of course.
So you would imagine that cameras also can zoom. Huh.
Yeah, you could imagine that, but I guess it was not. I did not know why people didn't think of that. What they did think about, though, is digital images, as early as 1957, although that was just a scan of a regular picture.
Well, that doesn't really count.
Yeah, that doesn't count, right? Yeah, in 1975, so that's about 45 years ago now. It's hard to calculate that. The first digital camera was published, and the first picture was taken. How many megapixels do you think that was?
I think maybe 1 or 2.
Yeah, not even close. Several orders of magnitude too much. It was 10 kilopixels.
Oh.
So that's 0.01 megapixel.
Wow.
Not that much, but again, it's a start.
Yeah.
Fun fact though, the company Kodak, which I mentioned about, did not follow because they did not see market in digital cameras, and boy, were they wrong.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, they did try it though in 2004, but they filed bankruptcy in 2012.
Oh man, that's a shame.
They were just too late. Yep.
Yeah, so it's...
Yeah, the bigger companies like Nikon and Canon already took over. And you've got, of course, the camera in your mobile phone right now, first introduced in the year 2000, which is just... That's the market right now. Old-fashioned cameras are hardly used anymore, only by... professional and hobbyists, I think.
Yeah, I mean...
Digital cameras are the world right now.
Yeah, so digital, the single lens reflex cameras, those are still widely used.
I think that's correct indeed. But how will it develop?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it's maybe a bit of a big step to go from the old photography that we had to more modern photography, because just the technologies that started to be implemented in cameras, it just went so quick, especially with the digital camera. Technologies that were being added were really, really insane. So yeah, I'm not sure where to start, because maybe we should just look at the digital single lens reflex camera and maybe go from there.
Yeah, sure.
Do you actually know how that thing works?
I know a bit or two, but please explain.
Let me show you a schematic of how it works. So on the front of the camera, you have a big lens, and that's the big lens that's used to focus the light. And then behind the lens, there is a reflex mirror, hence the name single reflex camera.
That makes sense indeed.
And what that does is it sends the light up at a right angle towards a pentaprism. And what that does is it like flips the image upside down. So it's for you, it's upright, and then it goes into the viewfinder. And the reason why it's doing that is because if you would have a separate lens for a separate viewfinder, you would have a slight parallax. So like this different perspective. And that would also cause you to have like a different image that you see and what the camera sees.
Okay, so in this manner you get the picture you actually expect to make.
Right, because the light that is coming in the viewfinder is the same light that would come in at the sensor that is behind the reflex mirror.
Yeah, and when you actually take the picture, the mirror just gets flipped,
right.
So it doesn't block the sensor, and then you get the actual picture, right?
Yeah, and that is also the reason why if you take the picture, the viewfinder goes black for a second, because there is no light coming in anymore in the viewfinder.
That makes sense, but that's only when you're talking about analog cameras, right?
Well, actually not, because digital, the DSLRs also use the exact same technology, except for that there is now like a sensor behind the mirror instead of an old film. So it's still the same. And then you might wonder,
okay, so
how do you do live preview? Like if you see a camera, usually what you see is, you got like a live preview, and that is
on a display, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And that is how mirrorless cameras work. Is they just take out the mirror altogether, and then instead what they use is they just send a pulse of electricity through the sensor to like mirror the shutter effect. Because okay, let me try to explain this. Usually what happens when the mirror flips up is that also the shutter goes down, and then the sensor behind it gets exposed, and then the shutter closes again, and then the mirror flips back down.
Okay, that makes sense.
But if you take out the mirror, then what happens is, I don't think there is a shutter anymore, but instead the sensor is put on and off for a certain amount of time. And then you basically have the same effect.
Okay, I think I get it.
And another thing that is pretty interesting is how does a camera actually autofocus? You just press a button, and then, or at least on DSLRs, you like half press a button and then it focuses automatically.
That's quite cool indeed.
Yeah.
It's always nice to get that feeling, and you can always manually adjust it if you want to, but
yes,
the digital and automatic version is of course really, really nice.
So from an optics standpoint, how you get a perfectly sharp image is you got light rays going out in all directions from an object, and those light rays that fall into the lens and are focused into one point are forming the image.
Yeah, that makes sense, of course. Otherwise, the image isn't sharp. It's just a bit blurry.
Right. If you want to focus a camera, what you do is you move the distances between the lenses so that the focal point changes. Well, slight editorial here. Of course, the focal point doesn't change, but the image distance changes.
That makes sense. And when the focal point is before or behind the place you want it to be, you can just iterate between the 2 points and find the perfect spot. Is that how it works?
Yeah, but it's not as easy as it sounds. You have two methods, and one of them is mostly used in mobile phones. The other one is mostly used in DSLRs. You got.
Why is the difference? Why the difference?
That's a very good question. Let me then first explain what cameras use, and then maybe you also understand why camera phones don't use it. So the face detection works, like very shortly explains, it works in such a way that you create two images by the works of prisms and lenses, and then these two images fall in on two separate sensors. And then what that does is it can analyze those two pictures, it can like overlay them, and with very complicated maths, determine whether the picture is out of focus or not.
Okay, I just have to believe you on that part.
Well,
I get what you want to say, but the math is of course hard to explain in a podcast.
Indeed, and also for the viewers, I can still put a nice video for you, and I'll also link it to you. You can watch it later. It really well explains how the out of face detection works in a really like clear manner.
The art looks quite nice on the preview. I'm definitely gonna watch that after recording.
So, but what this requires is that you have a fairly big lens. And you need to have like two sensors but also again two lenses to like focus the image that comes from 2 points. So you need a lot of optics and a lot of space, and cameras phones don't have that space.
So that's why they use, of course, another technique to reduce the size of the phone.
Yes, and that technique is called contrast detection autofocus, and that's way easier. Basically, what it does is it analyzes a picture. And then you can, again, with a little bit of algorithms and maps, you can like calculate how much contrast there is in the picture. And if the contrast is too low, then the lens moves a bit. And then if the contrast gets even lower, it moves the other direction. So it really goes back and forth and then tries to find the highest contrast. And that is how you get the picture in focus.
I get that. But why do digital cameras not use that technique if you say that's indeed the better way to do it?
Well, it's not entirely better. It depends on the situation. Contrast detection is slower because you have to move the camera back and forth and iterate a lot until you get a sharp picture. And if you have moving images, then that's going to be not fast enough to keep your object in focus. So that's why digital cameras...
So that's why digital cameras are always famous for making way better pictures than a mobile phone can do. And that's
not entirely
partly the answer, I think.
No, well, the reason why... and we're going a bit all over the place, but it doesn't matter. The reason why camera phones or mobile phone cameras don't have a very good image quality is because of their sensor size. And that... really goes to show, and for example, if you try to make a picture in a dark room with your mobile phone, it's pretty bad.
Okay, that's correct, and that's because of the size of the sensors.
Yes, because there is just not enough light coming in to actually have enough, like, to make enough contrast.
Okay, that makes sense. It does.
And that is also where like contrast detection autofocus is it doesn't work so great in darker environments.
Today I learned, I guess.
Yes, it's as soon as you start to dive into it, it's really interesting. Also, another thing that you gotta wonder is, but wait, how does a phone even focus? Because you need to move lenses, but do you even have space for that? Because everything is so small, right?
I can imagine that if indeed everything is so small, you only have to change 1 nanometer, maybe a few nanometers to make a real big difference between out of focus, in focus, or out of focus on the other side.
Yeah, so I looked up a couple of videos on YouTube, and actually what is the case is that you have like the lens module where all the lenses are enclosed, and you have like a casing, and this casing has magnetic corners, and around the lens module there is a coil. So with electromagnetism, you can that way move the lens module back and forth a little bit. And that is how...
And that little bit is just enough to make the difference between focus and out of focus.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's quite smart.
I really like those kind of solutions. It's because you have so little space, you got to be really inventive about how you get a nice picture.
Yeah, implementing a whole other technology just to fix a problem in photography. You gotta say, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, and also another question is, do you have any idea how many lenses there are in your phone?
Ooh, I always assumed there was only one, but I think I don't have the right answer over there.
No, so indeed, that is not the correct answer. Even older phones had at least like 3 or 4 lenses to make a good image.
Really?
Yeah, they're just really thin and really small.
Oh, who would have thought?
And even newer phones have even more. I think I'm not entirely sure, but more in the order of 7 or 8 lenses. And
okay, I'm looking at my phone right now, and I think I can see 2. but
Yeah, you really have to
can't
peel
see
them.
the other 6.
You really have to peel them apart because the space between the lenses is so small that you can hardly see it. And also that is the reason, because everything is so small, the lenses are made of plastic and not of glass, because of the geometry of everything is so small, you can't really use spherical lenses either. Those are not good enough. You will have too much aberration, so too much difference in focal length for different colors. So they use plastic lenses instead, and you can make those aspherical. So for example, the outer ring of the lens would diverge and the inner ring would converge, something like that. And that way you can
in that way the glass, or plastic in this case, doesn't rupture. Otherwise, I can imagine the glass would break, or it's just too thin to be even practical.
Well, I think it's technically even impossible to shape glass in such a way that it gets so aspherical, but I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, there's a lot of technology in this small device, and you wouldn't even think about it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Especially the fun fact about the number of lenses. I really like that one.
Yeah, when my teacher said the iPhone X has, I don't know, 8 lenses or something, I was like, wait, what? How?
That's so weird.
Okay, and then because we talked about mobile phones now, cameras in mobile phones, but even that is not, I would say, well, it's current technology, but not what will the future bring. And one piece of technology that I still wanted to mention is something that won't be implemented in mobile phones probably, well, not in the near future, but at least will already get implemented in DSLRs, is liquid lenses.
Is it because of the size of the liquid needed?
I'm not entirely sure. I think it may be the size of the electronics, or because it everything together gets quite bulky, like the whole piece of technology.
Okay, how does it work?
So imagine you have a box of oil, and you have a droplet of water inside it. The drop of water is just going to sit in there because the oil is hydrophobic. And now if you apply a current from one side to the other, the droplet will start to deform because water is dipolar.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And if you now imagine that this drop of water can act as a lens, then you can change the focal distance of this droplet just by applying a voltage over the oil and the water.
So that means you can make it in any shape you want to.
Exactly. You can,
well,
depending.
Practically almost any.
Yeah. Well, if you have...
That's so cool.
If you have more electrodes, then indeed you can also start to, like from different sides and different points in space, you can apply the voltage. And
okay, I can imagine that's quite sophisticated and not something we can do quite soon, but it is quite nice.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if this is like confirmed, if it will be, but soon enough this will appear in cameras. And the nice thing about this is that you can also do, you can make it such that the image stays still whenever the camera is moving a little bit or shaking.
So you just filter all the movements by the hand of the photographer.
Yeah, because
and make an image which is perfectly still.
Yeah, well, not entirely perfectly still, but at least already a lot more still. And this is, of course, because you can just continuously change the focal point of the image and the shape of the lens to compensate for the movement of the camera. So that way you still have a perfectly still image.
Technology is awesome, man.
Yeah, it's really cool.
We're getting somewhere, and we're already at a point which is quite nice. You can make pictures of things in such a high resolution, but the thing is that even that gets improved, and I just genuinely like that.
Also, if you want to know a bit more about how this electrowetting works, there's a video about that as well.
Okay, the thumbnail is really, really weird.
Yeah, and that is how it works, because if you apply a voltage over this, I think it's a comb, the water will get deflected because it's dipolar. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
that looks nice.
And
is there a way to try this at home?
I think there should be a way to try this at home, although I'm not entirely sure how. You just need a small voltage, I think, and then a sink.
I've got a sink.
Wait, let me actually see what he puts there. I think it's. Oh yeah, you can totally do this at home. I think you just grab a comb, you rub it against your hair, and I think if you then hold it to the fouquet, then it will deflect the water. It's really that easy.
So a balloon would work as well.
Or yeah, a balloon, but it's a bit bigger. But it's because of the static electricity. It creates an electric field,
nice.
and yeah.
Oh, I gotta try that.
So lots of technology, and
yeah, it's fun to think about. It's fun to read.
So now everybody got something to try at home. Also maybe experiment a little bit more with cameras. And otherwise, if you don't know what to do with your life, you can also just visit our website and check that one out.
That's a good bridge, you know. It's better than the last time we discussed something about making bridges.
Yeah, so...
Anyway, ageoftechpodcast.com.
Exactly. Where else can people find us?
And YouTube. iTunes.
Yes.
And that's about it. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Adios.
Bye-bye.